Hello and welcome to Digital Stratosphere, the podcast that provides independent and technology agnostic advice to help organizations through their digital transformation journeys. This show will help you dial in on what it takes to drive a successful digital transformation. You will learn about the best practices and premier strategies used by industry leaders who have driven millions of dollars in net positive business transformations. In this episode, we'll cover another important element you need to know to make your digital transformation successful. My name is Sarah Dokovic and I'm your host, and thank you so much for joining us today. Oftentimes, the lines can be blurry as to the role the board of directors plays in a digital transformation journey. Stuart Robb is here today to share his insights on the value that key company stakeholders bring to the table in ensuring a software implementation is successful. Stuart is the Vice President of Third Stage Consulting Europe, an independent and technology agnostic digital transformation consulting firm. He and his team have worked with some of the world's leading organizations in their digital transformation journeys and have helped many organizations, both local and international, transform their digital landscape successfully. Stuart, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm very well. Hopefully you're well as well. Now, I'm curious about the dynamics of digital transformation when it comes to the role that the board plays. So how involved do you typically see a board of directors being for the clients you've worked with and helped throughout a digital transformation?
I think it is true to say it varies a lot from company to company. And I think as well it depends on what the board structure is. Particularly if you've got a CEO who is also the chairman, you tend to find that other board members, the executive C-suite members, will be involved, but the NEDs maybe not so much. Whereas if you're in a PLC or a a Fortune 500 company where those roles are changed and the board chairman and the CEO are separated, you tend to find that the board want a bit more information. They're a bit more inquisitive. So there's no real single answer. I've tended to find that in a lot of SME organizations, the board tend to demur the ERP transformations to the operational and the operational issues that arise from that to the C-suite execs. Whereas again, in larger companies, they tend to want to find out more and they tend to want their own information. So it really depends on board to board.
Awesome. And are the transformation projects more or less successful when the board is actively involved in the process?
I think the answer is yes. I mean, I think it goes back again to how that board is structured. I mean, the board is there not only to measure the C-suite's progress towards developing the strategy and growing the company, but the board's other role is to foresee risk and to help work with the C-suites to mitigate that risk. And so given the profile of ERPs as being a high cost investment that's fraught with risk, you'll find some organizations where the board get very proactively involved and want to know the detail, and then others where the board is more passive, and if they get any update about it at all, are getting a very thin slice of what's really going on. And in fact, I mean, that's one of the things, we'll talk about it a little bit later about the business breakfast, but that's one of the things that we wanted to explore a little bit in more detail, is how different organizations see the role of the board in terms of their accountability for the success of an ERP, especially given the amount of money that these things cost. I mean, 5 or 6% of annual revenue spent on an ERP implementation is a significant block of money off the shareholder returns. And if it all gets written off, then the shareholders usually have something difficult to say about it. So I think one of the other areas as well, I've tended to find actually that private equity take a much more interventionist and a much closer to ERP implementations, and obviously they are represented on the board. So again, it depends on the type of company structure. You know, you can go into a large PLC and never meet a board member and as a senior on an ERP program. But most of the ones where I've been involved with private equity, they want to speak to you and they want to speak to you quite regularly. So it really does depend on the kind of organization.
Fair, yeah. And what can the board do to ensure an ERP and or digital transformation doesn't fail?
Well, I think, again, you know, this is one of the things we want to do on the 26th, is just get some experiences from C-suites and from non-execs to have that sort of discussion. I mean, I have my own hypothesis, which is that the more inquisitive a board is, especially some of the non-execs who are there to help and advise the board, the more people and the more experience you're sharing that knowledge with, and therefore the more likely you are to see a problem coming. And it's not exclusively, but you know, there are always warning signs in an ERP, even early on, that it's going to go off track. And so, you know, the board's participation and the board's inquisitiveness in how that's going and what's happening, and offering, you know, advice, support, you know, it's one end of the scale. And then the other end of the scale, I've seen in a couple of organizations, I mean, they do formal risk analysis. So the board actually, it's not the C-suite, the board appoints an independent assurer, and that assurance company comes in once a month, once every 4 months, 3 months, or whatever it is, and they provide an independent assurance of report that goes precisely to the board, you know, and the board look at that in the same way they would look at the audit results or the, you know, the recommendations from the remuneration committee. It's kept, you know, at arm's length from the executive operation of the company. So there are lots of options, and there's lots of, you know, there's a big span of how these things work.
Yeah. So basically, based on what you're saying, the board and other key company stakeholders alike play a huge role in the success of a digital transformation.
Well, it's that they're the people that are doing the work, you know, to safeguard the shareholders and the investors' investment in the firm. So if the company is making a big investment like an ERP or a digital transformation and the board aren't involved, you know, my question would be, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that you're going to be talking about this more in depth at the Digital Transformation Business Breakfast coming up in just a couple of weeks too, right?
We are on the 26th of February.
Awesome. We'll look forward to that as well. So when we come back from a quick break, Stuart and I are going to discuss the matter of the board's presence in a software implementation in a little bit more detail.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Welcome back to the Digital Stratosphere podcast. I'm Sarah Durkovich, speaking with Stuart Robb from Third Stage Consulting, discussing the true role the board of directors plays during a company's digital transformation. So various blogs and videos the Third Stage team has put out have stressed the importance of executive alignment. So does getting alignment from the board of directors fall into this category, or is this the approach and significance of getting the board's alignment differ in any way from getting alignment from, say, the C-suite?
Yeah, it's a good question, and actually, even getting alignment in the C-suite can sometimes be pretty tricky. I remember a ERP that I was working on a number of years ago, um, and we always had a tricky relationship, shall I say, with the head of customer services, and we could never figure out why until I happened to stumble upon the fact that he was goal aligned and his bonus was completely diametrically opposite to the goals of the transformation that we were doing. And so he was quasi supportive because he needed to be seen to be supportive. But if we were successful, his bonus pool would actually go down. And of course, once I found that out and we had that discussion with the CEO, we were able to put in place a package that fixed that. But those things can be pretty tricky to unpick. And then when you add a layer of politics over the top of that as well, who likes who doesn't like who, getting that even executive alignment can be a bit of a minefield. I actually think that the board, in terms of the board of directors, is slightly different. If that oversight role is working well and that support role is working well, then the board will always be challenging and supporting the C-suite execs to implement the strategy, and therefore their support and their challenge should be the same for an ERP initiative as it is for any other big strategy play that the C-suite execs might suggest. If it's an acquisition or if it's a divestment or anything else, I see digital transformation is in the same category of change. But again, it goes back to what I said a little bit earlier, which is around the role of the board and how that functions tends to be different in every company. And you'll find large companies have a much bigger separation of board and executive C-suites, whereas some of the smaller ones don't. So a well-functioning board, will take an interest in the initiative because it is a big investment, and they will challenge and support in equal measure.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, I wanted to ask you about this business breakfast. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so there's an awful lot of misinformation going around the market about what digital transformation is and what to expect from it. And even the word digital transformation is much abused by lots of different people. And the other thing that I've tended to find is that I tend to come across two types of senior leader or board director. One who has done an ERP, who thought it was an absolute horror story and never ever wants to do one again. And the other who's never had the horror story of having done an ERP and doesn't really know what they are. Mm-hmm. So I thought there was an opportunity for us to get out a little bit and evangelize, but also to explain what leading practice thinking is on ERP, how board members can get involved, and give them a bit of information about the current topics and the current issues in ERP, but also give them the opportunity to discuss with their own colleagues and peers, their experiences, any of their key learnings, what worked for them, what doesn't work, so that you're kind of building a little community of senior executives who have a point of view on ERP. So in April, for example, so this one is around the board's role in ERP and how to make it successful and what to watch out for. April, we're doing one on frontier technologies and what the barriers to adoption are. So things like artificial intelligence, and I know a lot of people are talking about that, but there are actually a lot of use cases for AI at the moment. So we'll talk a little bit about, what's the real truth behind adoption in artificial intelligence and machine learning and those kind of frontier technologies. And then March, we're doing one on ERP due diligence. April, we're doing one on ERP due diligence for private equity acquisitions. Or mostly private equity, but in fact, any company that's considering investing in acquiring another company, what are the things that you should watch out for in looking at their technology architecture and their technology stack, and what are the red flags that you should watch out for. So we got 11 of these lined up, so that's just the sort of the rest of the quarter, what we're planning on doing with those.
That's awesome. And it sounds like a really great opportunity to not only learn more about an important topic, but also to network with other leaders in the industry. So how can our listeners register for this event?
Well, so very simple. If you're a C-suite exec or a board level director, the easiest way to register is to drop an email to events@thirdstage-consulting.com, which hopefully by the magic of technology will appear somewhere down the bottom, or maybe up the top, or who knows where it's going to be. The easiest way is to email that address. We will then send you back a web link with a registration form, and you'll get a link for Zoom a little bit nearer the event. It's the 26th of February. It's mostly aimed at Europe because it's very early in the morning for the US. So we're starting at 8 a.m. in Europe, but if any US C-suite or non-exec colleagues would like to join it at 10 o'clock at night, they are very, very, very welcome. So that's 8 a.m. London, 9 a.m. Central European time. And we are limiting the spaces on this just because we want to keep the sessions interactive and stimulate a conversation. Of course, you find you've got 500 people on. People tend not to say anything at all. So book early for Christmas.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And we're about out of time, but I wanted to thank you so much for being here today and for sharing these powerful insights with us today.
No problem at all. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank all of you for listening today as well. Again, my name is Sarah Durkovic. It will see you next time on our next episode of the Digital Stratosphere podcast.